Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Today I'll be speaking with Emily. She's the mother of a 14-year-old child who has type 1 diabetes. There's some other autoimmune stuff throughout her family. And let's see what else. So she's an expat living in the United Kingdom. Her daughter has chronic digestive issues, as well as type 1. And today we're going to talk to her all about that. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. If you have type 1 diabetes or are the caregiver of someone with type 1 and you're a U.S. resident, I'm asking you, with much love, to go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox, join the registry, complete the survey. You're helping with type 1 diabetes research. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Go complete that survey, please. When you use the link hungryroot.com/juicebox, you'll save 40% off of your first order. All the details are right at the top of the link, hungryroot.com/juicebox. And check out the private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast Type 1 Diabetes. You want to meet people who live with diabetes? You're going to meet a lot of them there because we have 52,000 active members. US Med is sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast, and we've been getting our diabetes supplies from US Med for years. You can as well. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. Use the link or the number, get your free benefits check, and get started today with US Med. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Eversense CGM. Eversense is going to let you break away from some of the CGM norms you may be accustomed to. No more weekly or bi-weekly hassles of sensor changes. Never again will you be able to accidentally bump your sensor off. You won't have to carry around CGM supplies. And worrying about your adhesive lasting? Well, that's a thing of the past. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. This show is sponsored today by the glucagon that my daughter carries, Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox.
Hi, my name is Emily, and I'm the parent of a 14-year-old girl with type 1 diabetes.
Your daughter is 14. Emily, how old are you?
47.
Do you really not know, or you don't want to say?
I'm pretty sure I'm 47. Like after 45, I feel like you kind of forget.
I haven't said this in a while, but there's been twice in my life that I've lived an entire calendar year of my life believing that I was a different age than I was.
See, I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah. One day I said to my wife, I'm like, I can't believe I'm going to be, 49? I can't believe I'm going to be 49 on my birthday. And she goes, are you kidding me? And I was like, what? And she goes, you are 49. And I was like, no, I'm not. And I stopped. And I was like, 1970. Oh my God. A whole year of my life happened to me twice. You're 47. She's 14. Married? Any other kids? Anything like that?
Yeah, married. And I have a 24-year-old and a 21-year-old.
Oh, Emily, there's the story right there. Is the 14-year-old with a second husband, or did you guys go to a wedding?
No, all the same. All same.
What happened then?
What happened that I have a 24-year-old?
No, I mean, no, what happened? I get the 24-year-old. I'm okay with that.
Oh.
The 7 years between seriously, did you have sex by mistake? Like, what happened?
Well, okay, so I got pregnant really young with our first, and then, after you want one, you think, well, let's have another one, right? And so then we had our second, and then my husband went to grad school, and then I went to grad school, and I don't know, we always wanted another one, and then we had Rosie.
Gotcha.
Years later.
All right, so I gotcha. So you guys had family first, maybe not on purpose.
Yeah, it was a surprise.
Yeah. I have a baby like that. And then you took care of yourselves, put yourself in the position you wanted to be in, and then went back again and said, okay, build a family, build a life. Let's have that last baby we were thinking about.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a very wholesome story.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I did tell you I was kind of boring, but yeah.
I thought maybe you guys like got bored for 7 years and then one day went to a wedding and the next thing you know, you had a baby. Because that's what usually happens.
No.
Little drinky on a Saturday night, feel young for a minute. You know what I mean?
I mean, my second kid was pretty challenging. I felt like I needed a lot of time in between, and there was a point where they're just so you know, they're non-binary, and they use they're trans femme, and they use they them as pronouns.
Okay.
That this is my 21-year-old, and sometimes I mix up though if I go back, because when they were younger, I think of them as a boy. So if I mess up, it's just because of that.
I understand.
But anyway, when my 21-year-old was younger, I don't know, 8 years old, and I was kind of working part-time but mostly like staying at home with them. And it was just so hard. And I thought, what could be easier than raising this child? And so I put them in daycare and went to grad school because I actually thought that would be easier.
Do they know that about themselves as a little kid?
Oh yeah. They were like, yeah, they're just a really funny person, and they'll say, yeah, I was a total asshole.
Is there any autoimmune with you, your husband, or your other 2 kids?
I suspect that my 24-year-old has, or I hope that he doesn't have Crohn's or celiac, but it's possible. He's had a lot of GI issues, and you know, you can only tell your 24-year-old so many times that they should probably get an official celiac test. But they just took out gluten, and they're like, look, it works. I feel better. So I don't know. I definitely have some arthritis issues, but I think it's probably osteoarthritis. My mom has some pretty severe arthritis issues. Also, she's always been told it's osteoarthritis, but it does hers is quite severe now. Mm-hmm. And both of our issues tend to be kind of autoimmune in nature, likely just called osteoarthritis rather than rheumatoid.
And Rosie, just type 1 or anything else? If you take insulin or sulfonylureas, you are at risk for your blood sugar going too low. You need a safety net when it matters most. Be ready with Gvoke HypoPen. My daughter carries Gvoke HypoPen everywhere she goes because it's a ready-to-use rescue pen for treating very low blood sugar in people with diabetes ages 2 and above that I trust. Low blood sugar emergencies can happen unexpectedly, and they demand quick action. Luckily, Gvoke HypoPen can be administered in 2 simple steps, even by yourself in certain situations. Show those around you where you store Gvoke HypoPen and how to use it. They need to know how to use Gvoke HypoPen before an emergency situation happens. Learn more about why Gvoke HypoPen is in Arden's Diabetes Toolkit at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Gvoke shouldn't be used if you have a tumor in the gland on the top of your kidneys called a pheochromocytoma, or if you have a tumor in your pancreas called an insulinoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk for safety information.
Yeah, I mean, she definitely has some kind of GI issues going on as well, but she's always negative for celiac and doesn't seem to have anything. I mean, she doesn't seem to present with anything like Crohn's or colitis or anything.
Are those issues just since the diabetes?
No, she's always kind of had kind of chronic constipation, which I know that seems to be kind of a common theme with a lot of folks with type 1, but that, we've addressed it, but it's still there. I mean, even today, so she missed school this morning because of a stomach ache. And I can't really explain it. We've been to I've been to the GP. I've talked to her consultant about it quite a bit.
I have an easy thing for you to try. So
yes. Okay.
I don't know if you've heard the episode called Arden's Supplements.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Has she tried?
I just haven't done. I mean, we do a probiotic. I'm trying to remember the one that you. Yes, I will go back and listen to that.
It's 767. But the quick, easy answer is just to try mixing a digestive enzyme with her meals.
Yes,
and see if that whole thing doesn't kind of work itself out.
Yeah, we'll definitely give it a go. I mean, I feel like we've kind of we've done the whole macrogol route. And
yeah, it's a low cost
yeah.
thing. There's no skin off your ass to pop the little tablet in your mouth before you eat for a week just to see how it goes. And, you know, I try to remind people as much as I can, like your pancreas doesn't just make insulin, it does other things, and it has a lot to do with digestion. A lot of people with type 1 seem to have digestion issues.
Yeah. I think, that's a good reminder. Thank you. I will give that a go.
Emily, I have a question before we move forward. There's a rock song. I think it's an AC/DC song with Rosie in the title, and my brain can't think of it, and it won't leave me alone about it. Do you know what it is?
Oh,
you don't know.
No, sorry. I mean, I probably knew all the songs in high school, but
I got it.
I feel like my brain doesn't store that anymore.
Whole Lot of Rosie.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what it's about. I'm not making any inferences about your kid. You said Rosie, and I'm like, oh, there's a song. And I could feel isn't that strange? I could feel the beat of the song, but I couldn't hear the music, and and now when I thought, I think it's AC/DC, then I was able to Google it real quick. Anyway. No, I was going to think about the whole goddamn hour if I didn't figure it out. So I apologize.
No, I'm going to look for it for her then. She kind of likes the songs from my high school days.
From the 70s? Oh, look at you. Yeah.
No, wait, that's not 70s, right? Wouldn't that be later?
Wait, AC/DC's not.
Oh, maybe it would be.
No, this song
70s?
77.
Oh, okay.
It was
all right.
on the Let There Be Rock album in 1977.
Oh, okay.
You're older than you think you are, Emily.
It's true. Yeah. I mean, I was born in 77, so I wasn't listening to AC/DC then, but yeah, sure.
But we all were. I mean, honestly,
I should know.
In my 20s, like classic rock radio was huge. So you're you're a couple of years behind me. Maybe not. Well, I don't know. It's not worth talking about because that's not why you're here mostly. Why are you here? What made you want to come on?
Well, a friend had been on and she had said, oh, you should do it. And I think you were looking for guests on the Facebook group, and I've always thought, well, I'm not quite sure what I could talk about because you do interview a lot of, I don't know, white middle-class moms. I sent an email and thought I could talk about unschooling. So Rosie, she now actually goes to school, but she did not go to school until age 14. And we are Americans living in the UK and have chosen to stay partially because of healthcare here. So I don't know if that's interesting to.
We're going to find out. Listen, also very possible we call this episode White Middle Class Mom. So, because you said at the beginning, you're like, I'm going to be boring. And I was like, I'll put a boring title with it. That'll be fantastic.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
So how do you end up in England first?
Well, we were living in Portland, Oregon, and mostly raised our kids there. And we had briefly lived overseas before. So we lived in Japan briefly and thought it was a great experience for us and a great experience for our kids. And we were open to the idea of going abroad again. And my husband was able to just kind of get a work transfer over here. And so we came over for kind of this 2-year experiment. And 8 years later, here we are.
8 years you've been there now.
Yeah.
You have no accent at all.
No British accent?
Yeah, but you don't even like a touch of it. Like I went on vacation in the South once, and my father came home like he was on Hee-Haw. So
with a Southern accent?
Yeah. It was crazy.
I mean, it does come out every once in a while. Like, I think there's certain words that I say that even on accident here, like if I'm talking with people and I say tomato, which is just so ridiculous. But you hear words the British way all the time, then you start to say them. But yeah, I don't think I do.
Would you say aluminum or would you say aluminium?
Oh, aluminum. Oh,
okay. All right. Yeah.
Even Rosie, she's been here since she was 6 and I don't think she has a British accent at all. Although when we go home to Portland, friends and family will say, oh, she's got an accent. But she definitely doesn't.
I gotcha. Okay. I'm sorry. You used a term about school that made it feel like I actually felt like you were making a hemp purse while you were using that term. It sounded like such a hippie thing. Yeah. But what is it again?
I know. It's so hippy dippy. Yeah. It does. So unschooling.
Unschooling. Is that like when, what's her name, divorced the kid from Coldplay? Did they uncouple?
Oh,
do you remember that? What was that? Who's the lady that sells you the egg for your vagina?
Oh, gosh.
Gwyneth Paltrow.
Gwyneth Paltrow, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And she was married to the Coldplay boy.
Right.
Who I can't talk about because By the way, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole again, Emily, but I don't like Coldplay. And I said that in front of my son. I said, they only have 2 or 3 good songs. And he's like, my son goes, look, I'm not a Coldplay fan. He goes, but they have more good songs than that. And then he made me go through them in the car. And they did have, I'm going to just say, they did have about 8 songs that I enjoyed. I just don't like the Coldplay boy. He gives me a weird, douchey vibe. Just, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, when
totally.
they got divorced, they told people they were consciously uncoupling.
Oh yeah.
So
I don't know.
With that embarrassment in your mind, tell me again what it's called. Unschooling?
Unschooling.
How does that happen?
I mean, unschooling, it's definitely kind of more of I guess it is used here in the UK, but it's not necessarily uneducating, right? Or it's not anti-school or anti-education. I think the term was started by folks that maybe didn't want to necessarily homeschool. They didn't say they were going to not send their kids to school, right? But maybe they didn't want to sit at the kitchen table and just do, books and a curriculum the whole time, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's not anti-school. Here, I would say, people mostly say home educate, I guess, which is kind of, I would think of that as homeschooling too. But yeah, I don't know if I'm explaining it very well.
I have it. But Emily, but how does it, so first of all, you've got a 24, a 21, and a 14. Does a 24-year-old go to regular school, K through 12?
So my 24-year-old went to school when he was younger up until about first grade. And then we went to Japan. And so at that time I had just the 2 kids. And I went to his teacher in first grade and I said, look, we're going to go to Japan for 3 months and it's going to miss all this school. I'm really worried. Could you give me the, the curriculum and we'll follow along? And I had visions of, we're going to maybe at the time, a Skype, right? It wasn't Zoom or anything, but maybe we could Skype with the class and we'll follow along with this curriculum. And, this teacher was so nice and printed out, this huge stack of worksheets for us to do. And so, I dragged this all the way to Japan with us. And I remember one of the first days we were there, I said to my son, it looks like the class is doing, they're making this bird habitat out of cotton balls. So we should do that. Well, we can just take some pictures. We can send it to your teacher. And my son was like, I don't want to make that. Why would I make that? Why can't we just go to the zoo? Why would we make this bird habitat out of cotton balls? And I thought, actually, you're right. I don't want to make this either. And then I just started taking my kids all over. I mean, how lucky were we? I feel like very privileged that we got this opportunity. We went to every museum in Tokyo. We traveled all over, as much as we could in those 3 months around Japan. He was reading everywhere. So he was constantly had a book in his hand on the trains. In Tokyo, the train system is color coded and numbered. And he would figure out, if we were at, say, like, the yellow station. I mean, it does have a name, but say like yellow 32 or whatever. And we were going to go to train station yellow 17. How many stops do we have? So he would figure that out. And he was constantly doing math, right? And then I could send him to the store at age 7, with Japanese currency, and he would go and buy the milk for us, and he knew how much change he should get. Right. So he was learning just from living, right? I think my younger one was maybe about 4. My kid who's 21 now. And then when we got back to the US, it was summer, and then he was going to start in the next year. Well, maybe he was in second grade, whatever it was. Anyway, it was young primary school, right? And so I went to the next teacher that he was supposed to go into. I think it was third grade. And so I went to the third grade teacher and I said, he missed these 3 months of school and I had this curriculum, but I'm really sorry. We didn't do it. So I feel like he's probably going to be behind. I'm really sorry. She, of course, she gets like a very serious look on her face and like, oh, okay.
I'm sorry, you can't come back until you give us a cotton ball birdhouse.
Yeah. Well, that's right. Yeah. Where's that cotton ball birdhouse?
Diabetes comes with a lot of things to remember. So it's nice when someone takes something off of your plate. US Med has done that for us. When it's time for Ardent supplies to be refreshed, we get an email. rolls up and in your inbox says, "Hi, Arden. This is your friendly reorder email from US Med." You open up the email. It's a big button that says, "Click here to reorder," and you're done. Finally, somebody taking away a responsibility instead of adding one. US Med has done that for us. An email arrives, we click on a link, and the next thing you know, your products are at the front door. That simple. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. I never have to wonder if Arden has enough supplies. I click on one link, I open up a box, I put the stuff in the drawer, and we're done. US Med carries everything from insulin pumps and diabetes testing supplies to the latest CGMs like the Libre 3 and the Dexcom G7. They accept Medicare nationwide, over 800 private insurers, and all you have to do to get started is call 888-721-1514 or go to my link, usmed.com/juicebox. Using that number or my link helps to support the production of the Juicebox Podcast. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the only CGM you can take off to get into the shower, the Eversense CGM. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. Well, I mean, sure, you could take the other ones off, but then you'd waste a sensor and have to start over again. But not with Eversense. Eversense is a 6-month wear implantable CGM. So if you want to take a shower without anything hanging on you, pop off the transmitter, jump in the shower. When you get back out, put it back on, and you're right back to where you started. Come to think of it, you could do that whenever you wanted to. Maybe it was your prom night or your wedding day. Maybe you just don't want the thing on for a little while, but you don't want to go all through the hassle of taking it off and having to restart it and, starting back over with like wonky numbers and having to, all that goes with it when you take off a CGM and put it back on. Oh, but you don't have to do that with the Eversense CGM. Because Eversense is the only long-term CGM with 6 months of real-time glucose readings. This gives you more confidence, more convenience, and flexibility. The Eversense CGM is there for you when you want discretion, a break, or maybe just a little adult time. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. Pop that transmitter off, pop it back on, you're right back where you started, without any wasted devices or time.
So then she stopped me several weeks later and she said, I don't know what you did, but he's actually way ahead. And that's when I realized that, oh yeah, we could just kind of do our own thing. Mm-hmm. So that kid went through, so he finished around 5th grade and then started kind of home educating, unschooling with us. And then my kid who's 21 got through about, the middle of the year of 1st grade. And I realized, I don't think this kid is cut out for a classroom. I mean, they weren't the kid that was like running to the window when a bus would drive by or anything, but they would just sit at their desk and take a nap the whole time. And so I felt like we needed something else for my middle kid, because at the time they were coming home after school and saying, well, I'm the stupid one and everyone else is smart. And I thought, you have to like yourself at minimum, right? You have to at least believe in yourself, or the learning's not going to happen at all. So we kind of started doing our own thing and taking lots of classes. So Portland has a really nice, I say home ed or unschooling community. So lots of folks that are, kids don't go to school, but they take classes in the community or extracurricular activities. Okay. Anyway, that's what we did. And then Rosie came along. And at that point,
that's just how you
when
do
she
it.
was 6, we moved over. Yeah, we just kept doing it. And then when we moved to London, it was amazing. She's probably been to, nearly every museum in London with peers in some kind of home ed shop in a museum or a historical site.
I have a question. So you have a 24-year-old, right? Did they go to college?
Yeah. So what they did is they were really into music. And so when we moved over here, I'm trying to remember the track they did. So they wanted to do music production, and they were already kind of dabbling in it on their own, on his own. And so I think he took the he took the US GED early, because I think he was about 16 or 17 at the time. And a lot of homeschoolers or unschoolers in the US use the US GED or they were, I'm not quite sure if they're still using it, but at the time the US GED was sometimes a good way to access, say, like community college.
Yeah.
Or, adult classes that you want to take. And so he took the US GED and then used that to apply here in the UK to what's called a BTEC level 3 in music production.
Mm-hmm.
And then he took that diploma or the BTEC degree and applied to university here for music engineering. Although he did not finish, but that is because he's in a band, and the band was signed to a label at that time. And then also he was already getting paid to do music engineering. So he was kind of, already getting paid for something that he was learning in university, and felt like, he felt like it wasn't really worth it to keep going. At the time, of course, I don't know. I think it was maybe kind of an old school idea of mine, like that you just get this piece of paper, right? This piece of paper is really important that says you've done this. But I think he was right. He didn't really need it. And he hasn't gone back.
Makes a living, takes care of himself, is doing well. Like, how would you hold up his current success against other 24-year-olds?
I mean, probably fairly equivalent. I mean, he's still like, it's hard to make it in music, right? Mm-hmm. So I would still call him a dependent in some ways, but he's doing all right. I mean, we just want them to be happy, and
it's interesting. Yeah, Emily, I'm going to ask a lot of questions. I'm not coming down on your position. I'm really interested.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think I had a kid when I was 24. Or you did.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. You were on your way to another one. Yeah. And then you took a very traditional route, you and your husband. And I'm guessing you've got 2 advanced degrees and you're living overseas. You guys are doing okay.
Yeah.
So if you were broke, do you think you'd be like, hey, go to school, figure out something because you got to get out there and make money? Do you think that this is partly a thing that they're able to do because you're able to fortify it?
Yeah, I do think that there's a whole lot of privilege in what we've been able to do, for sure.
Okay.
But I don't necessarily think that a degree is for everyone. I mean, my 21-year-olds, they work in a pub right now, almost full time, and they're quite happy working in the pub, and they're not quite sure what they want to do. And I think that's okay. I don't know if they will end up going to university or maybe doing something in the arts, or, I think it just depends on the person.
I'm
right?
perplexed by this. I have my son just turned 24 like 2 weeks ago, and my daughter's going to turn 20. Right. So I'm in your boat minus the, hey, let's have one more. I'm always like running through this in my head because I was incredibly broke growing up. My wife was broke growing up. We're more comfortable now. There's part of you that's like, I can't leave you an amount of money to make sure you're okay. Like, you're going to have to take care of yourself. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how, and the unknown of like, what does that turn into? Like, what if the system just demands what it demands, and whether it's right or wrong? Because I hear your story and I think this is fantastic. Like, imagine raising a kid for all those years, taking them out, doing cultural things, letting them learn math and real world experiences. Like, all this stuff sounds amazing. Your kids are probably amazingly like rich and, in knowledge and experience and all that stuff. But what happens on that day when so they meet somebody and that somebody's like, I want a baby and a house, and I want a car, and I want the car to be safe, and I don't want to eat crappy food, and let's go right now. You know what I mean? And you're like, I don't have a degree. I can't get that job. I don't know how to make that much money. I'm happy. And you know what I mean? Like, when does that, that's my worry for me. Like, when does that worry, when does that I'm happy turn into I can't take care of myself? Do you think about that?
Well, I would say I've never been anti-education. I think I think that my oldest kid is really academic. Mm-hmm. I think if he wanted to go, and if it was going to be more lucrative for him in the music field to go and do some kind of music, to go finish the music engineering degree, then he should do that. But I don't know if that is necessarily for his industry and what he wants to do. I don't know if a degree is really necessary. If he had said, look, I want to be a pharmacist or whatever, of course, but I think as long as, he's on the track to supporting himself.
I'm talking about when, again, I'm not talking about your kid. You're just a good person to have this conversation with. Like, Like I'm talking about the difference between making enough to get by. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I got a job. I do okay. I make $50,000 a year. I pay my bills. I don't have a lot extra, but I have my house is clean. You know what I mean? Like I'm okay. I can cover my nut, etc. The difference between that and when the person looks you in the face one day and says, I want the kids to have a yard to run around in, and it's on you. And you're like, I don't know how to make that happen. I can't believe I'm saying this because I don't believe in this, but I do believe in it. I believe in what the world wants, not in what might be right for you or another person. Like, what if you have nothing to fall back on? Like, you know, even just that, the idea of having a network of other people who went to college who might be well employed that you can call up and go, hey, do you remember me? Like, you got anything open there? Like that kind of like thing, like that, all that disappears. You don't build that network, right?
Maybe you have a different network. I mean, if you, I mean, I guess there are plenty of folks that went through high school, like US high school, for example, or here, that like the GCSE track, which is somewhat similar. Yeah. And then didn't go on to university and they find their way. I don't know if like a bachelor's degree, you know, is right for everyone, and that's fine. I mean, in the US, it's quite expensive too.
Yeah. Oh, I don't think it is. I don't think it's. I mean, honestly, I don't know that it's necessary for anyone. It's necessary if you want to, if you have the expectation of, a single family home, or, you know, a car that doesn't break all the time, or $5 aside when you need it, or when you get old and it costs $3,000 a month to stay alive. Like, and you haven't worked in 15 years. Like, that's the kind of stuff. Like, it's just interesting. Like, your mind and my mind, just, we worry about different things. Like, because I guarantee you and I agree about all the fundamentals of what you've just said about people and happiness, and etc.
I don't know. I feel like I do know quite a few folks that have, you know, degrees or even advanced degrees that aren't necessarily like
doing well either.
I mean, they have
overly well.
I mean, they're doing okay, but you know, that maybe they could, you know, have not done that track and still been made out the same. I don't know, or maybe have had, you know, if they're in the US, had less.
Yeah, it's the I don't
college
know
debt to worry about, right?
Yeah. It's so the part where I'm jealous of you is that it's in the I don't know. Like, you're willing to say I don't know, and it doesn't matter. Keep doing the thing you like. And I wonder if I'm not a person who says I don't know, but you better make sure you're going to be okay as best you can, even if it doesn't work out. These are the steps you should take to ensure as much as possible this kind of like comfort.
Well, I mean, I was definitely there when my kid was like, I don't want to finish this bachelor's program because I'm already getting paid what they're teaching me. And this is kind of, you know, why would I do this? Right. Yeah. And at the time, you know, like I said, I definitely, and my husband as well, both of us were like, dude, just get the piece of paper, right? You get this piece of paper that says you have a bachelor's degree, you're almost done. Right. But now I understand. I mean, he would have missed out on all these music opportunities. So, you know, yeah, you're right. I don't know. I mean, I think he's going to be okay. I'm not worried about him.
I wonder how much of the difference is just that you grew up on the West Coast, right? Like the upper Northwest.
For sure.
I grew up on the East Coast, where it's very like,
it is quite culturally different.
It's like go, win, kill, like, or die. You know what I mean? And and you kind of were like, hey, it's cool. We're gonna make like, we'll probably make heroin legal. Like that kind of. So, by the way, I think they took that back. Do you keep
up? Oregon, or?
Yeah. Do you keep up with home? I think Oregon was like, hey, we shouldn't have done that, and I think they went backwards on it.
Oh, did they? I don't know. I mean, I do try to keep up. I mean, I still vote out of Oregon, but not. I don't think I can vote in that. I don't know, in those measures. I can't. I'm not quite sure.
Oregon legislators vote to recriminalize low-level drug possession.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
wow.
They were like, that didn't work. Let's try.
It's too bad. I feel like that works in Spain and Portugal. I mean, I don't know. I mean, don't quote me there. But,
please. I don't know anything.
I feel like it works in other parts of the world, and maybe it could work, but.
Yeah, I just heard it on the news the other day. I was like, they were like, they're going backwards on some of that stuff that they did, because it wasn't that long ago, right? They decriminalized like most drugs, I think. And
I think so.
yeah.
I didn't realize they backtracked that, but
yeah,
I keep up as much as I can. But
interesting stuff. So you have this great experience. Your children are growing up well. You're like, hell, let's just do it again. You're not the kind of like, you're not looking to build a whatever the British version of a cotton ball house is. So you're like, I'm not doing this. And then your daughter is going along fine. How old is she when she's diagnosed then?
Yeah, so we were here when she was diagnosed. She was 8.
8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, like 6 years ago. Out of nowhere, took you by surprise, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised. My mom has always shared this story that her told her this. So this story was her grandmother would tell her when she was a child, was that the grandmother had moved from Eastern Canada to California as a young woman with a sister that had diabetes. Mm-hmm. And the sister would have been very young, like late teens, early 20s maybe. And that would have been at the turn of the century. And they had moved believing there was a cure for diabetes in California. And obviously the sister, she didn't make it, right? Mm. And so my mom had always kind of talked about diabetes when I was a kid. I have one sister, neither one of us had type 1, but I kind of knew about it. Like if we were thirsty, for example, or, just randomly, my mom would be like, oh, we do have diabetes in the family, right? But it would have been way back there and it didn't pop up again. I think my mom has a first cousin as well, but, I didn't have any cousins with it or anything. So it was quite removed. When we lived in Portland for 10 years, I had a neighbor who, her kid had befriended my kids, and her kid at the time was 5. And this was even before Rosie was born. So her kid just liked being at our house. And I think she had moved back to the neighborhood to care for her parents, and her kid had been diagnosed at age 3, I think. Mm. I was kind of the first friend that she met that when she said, my kid has type 1, could he come over and play? And, here's all these things you need to know. Is that okay? And I was kind of the first person, maybe because I was a healthcare professional and was somewhat familiar with type 1 and interested, right? I said, yeah, sure, he can come over. And her kid he had sleepovers at our house. When she went on her honeymoon, I gave her kid mixed insulin in a syringe. I checked his blood sugar in the middle of the night. I remember when she got a Dexcom, and I remember, how excited she was and her showing me, look, I can see, his blood sugar on my phone. And, I didn't quite at the time understand the level of excitement. I mean, obviously now I get it.
Yeah, you get it now.
But I had all this experience with type 1. And then with Rosie, obviously you don't want it to be that, right? I mean, I thought that she might have it just because she was so thirsty and it looked like her muscles were wasting away, mm-hmm. right? And I bought a test kit and I went in one night and I thought, I'm just gonna, and I knew, and she was pretty scared of needles, right? So, and there's no way she would have let me poke her finger. So I tried to go in the middle of the night to like poke her toe, and that did not work. So then the next morning, I told my husband, look, I think she might have type 1. And, he said, and he was quite familiar with my older kid's friend that had, kind of grown up in the neighborhood with them. He said, then he started worrying about it too. And he's like, I'm really worried about this. I think you might be right. And so I knew she wouldn't, again, let me poke her finger. I didn't want to hold her down. I knew if this was type 1, I needed to go into this with her 100% trusting me, right? And mm-hmm. so I called the GP and I just said, look, I think this is what's going on. Could we come in? And miraculously, we got a same day appointment, which is fairly rare here in the UK, although it does happen. And so I brought the test kit in and I, just told the GP, look, I think she might have this. Could you please tell her? And it just explained that we have to poke her finger, because I wanted the GP to say it rather than me. Yeah. And unfortunately, he wasn't the best. And there are some great GPs out there in the UK. So I hope this doesn't, give anybody a bad impression of the NHS, because it is really amazing. I had a really horrible experience with it when she was diagnosed, but it is an amazing, the NHS is incredible. But the GP was like, no, we don't need to do that. And I said, well, are you sure? Because I brought this test kit. Here's all her symptoms. And I think he probably saw in his practice, he probably saw a lot of folks with type 2. He probably, maybe didn't even ever see a kid with type 1. I have no idea, but he just didn't really know about it. And well, first I said, look, could you at least dip her urine for me? Because then I'll know. And so he agreed to dip her urine, but then he did it incorrectly. And he said, well, it does look like there's sugar in it, or glucose in it, but that could be an infection. And then I kind of knew that, he probably wasn't right. And so he said, well, I'll order a blood test, right? How about, because I did kind of press him, no, we need to do more. This is not, this is not enough. Right. And he said, well, I'll order a blood test. And then I thought it would be like in the US. I didn't have a lot of experience with the NHS at that time, right? So I just assumed the blood test would be, the same day, maybe next door, maybe in the clinic. But the blood test was like next week sometime. And I think it was a Thursday or Friday. So it was, kind of the end of the week. And blood test was in a totally different location. And so I just walked Rosie home from the GP and I said, look, the GP wants to do this blood test in your arm here. I just want to poke your finger. You can do mine first. And could we just, would you be willing to do that? And I convinced her. So she poked my finger first and it was normal. And then we did hers and it just said hi. Mm. So then, we washed our hands. We did it again and hi again. I don't know if you want to hear the rest of my story. It wasn't great.
It wasn't. Well, I want to hear about it. I got to tell you that before you make me sad with this, I've so far been the saddest when you told me that your distant relatives went to California looking for a.
I know. Can you believe it?
Yeah,
and
it was
left
so sad.
Canada.
Oh,
it would have. I know. Oh, it's horrifying, isn't it? What a horrible death, right?
Well, it just like we're gonna try. I'm assuming like horseback or wagon or something like that. Like, in my mind,
probably railroad.
Well,
yeah,
who cares?
I thought about it a lot.
Yeah. You're making that trip thinking maybe there's a medical advancement there that's not here, and you don't even make it to find out. And now you've relocated your whole family, and along the way, your daughter died. Like,
So the story that I know, and so my mom and my sister and I would like to go back to Eastern Canada, where this grandmother had come from, and just maybe do some, spend some time. And maybe I think there might be some graves there that we could check out. I'm not sure, but my mom has, she's really into genealogy, and so from her understanding, it was just the two sisters. So the sisters left the parents basically, mm-hmm. and as young women, and again, probably went by train to California.
Yeah.
I think when my mom went back to look for some kind of death record, it wasn't in California, so she's not quite sure. But that was the story that the grandmother had told her.
Right. Still, it's just it's the desperation of it that made me sad.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, it's horrifying, isn't it?
That's what it was. Yeah, that's what it was. Okay, so when Rosie's diagnosed, do you have a little bit of a collapse personally? What were you about to tell me?
Well, I didn't want it. I knew there it couldn't really be anything else. Kids don't really tend to get pancreatic cancer, right? Mm-hmm. Somewhat of a collapse, but also after all that experience in Portland with my friend and watching her raise her kid. And, he's such a lovely person. And I felt like at least I knew we'd be okay. So I was sad for Rosie, but I felt like, we'll be okay.
Yeah.
So we'd gone to the GP, wasn't very helpful. But now I've got this finger poke that I know she has type 1, but I still didn't know quite what to do because I hadn't had a lot of experience with the NHS yet. So I called the GP back and I said, look, she definitely, this has to be type 1. I don't know what else it could be. Could you just tell me who in Greater London handles pediatric diabetes? And he's like, why do you think you need to go to the hospital? Why we can just, how about I'll order a specialist? And I was like, I I don't have insulin in my home. What if
Yeah.
she goes into DKA? I'm going to the hospital. I just need you to tell me which one to go to. I'm going. I'm telling you I'm
Also, a
going.
few minutes ago, you thought we didn't need to check her finger, so I'm not sure.
Right.
Yeah. What you know exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Finally, he gave me a couple options. I called a friend. She said, go to this one, right? We went to this hospital, and I was just happy that they gave her insulin, but they were so weird about the fact that we home educate, and that became the real focus of our visit.
How did that even come up?
Because they just ask, like, well, where do you go to school? And that day, our plan for that day was we were going to go to a nature study group in Kew Gardens with a bunch of friends. So it's not like, I'm keeping my homeschooled kid locked, in the basement or something. We're supposed to go to this learning group. And I realized, I got this GP appointment. So we skipped it. We, went to the GP that day. Now we've presented at the hospital. And then, of course, they ask all these questions at some point, like, where do you go to school? And I said, well, she's home educated. And then they said, well, we need to notify the local authority that you home educate. And I knew.
Why?
I knew the law. Yeah, well, exactly. They were wrong. So the law is on my side. And I said, look, actually, you don't have my permission to notify the local authority. And could we just focus on the diabetes? So they asked a lot of questions, which was quite frustrating because I felt like I've literally just explained ketoacidosis to the GP. I feel like I could probably teach KS2 or KS1 school, which is a school level here.
Yeah. And now it's like, now the focus went from your kid has diabetes to, hey, you educate your kid at home? What's wrong with you?
Yeah. No. So I had to call my the other kids at home, which they were teens at the time. And I just said, look, I'm really sorry. She does have type 1 and we're going to be in the hospital for a while. And also social services might come to the door. Could you not swear at them and just tell them where I'm at? Right. Anyway, social services did not want to see us. And
no, that was a misunderstanding at the hospital side.
Well, they messed up. So they did later. They sent me a formal apology, and they were really worried because they had violated our privacy, our information. Mm-hmm. Right? They should not have shared our information without my permission. That is the law. Like
they did it anyway when you said don't do that.
Yeah, but at the time it was pre-pandemic. It was pre-COVID, right? And homeschooling or home education, it wasn't very common here at the time. And so I think to their credit, the nurse that saw us had just taken some kind of like safeguarding continuing ed course where home educators might be a red flag, right? Obviously we weren't. I'm there to get help, but
she caught you guys building a bomb in your house or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
She's like, this lady's running a cult. I know it for sure. Yeah,
for sure.
Not crazy. What a leap. Sure. By the way, what a leap.
It was a bit weird, and especially because I'd gone from the GP, and again, I knew there are great healthcare professionals here, but in the moment, because I'm just focusing on get my kid some help right now, right? Before she goes into DKA, I Google, on my phone, when we presented to the hospital after dealing with the GP, I literally came in with a UK type 1 diabetes campaign on my phone because I thought, what if they think I'm some wacky American? Like there was a moment where I thought, could we make it to New York before she goes into DKA? Because clearly no one here knows what I'm talking about, right? And that's fairly irrational because there are great healthcare professionals here. Now she has a fantastic consultant. But in the moment when I didn't have any experience with the NHS, it was pretty stressful, but we survived. Yeah,
but it's a good look into the uncertainty of the situation and how you felt on top of all that. Because isn't it funny? You had the same thought that your forefathers had. Like, there's probably a place that knows better. Let's go there. It's really interesting.
Let's get out of here. Yeah.
What a train ride that would have been.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you get this all worked out. She comes home, and what's management like? And, is it needles? Is it pumps? CGMs are available? Like, do you get that stuff in any kind of short order?
When she was diagnosed, the the NHS, or more specifically, I think it's called your clinical commissioning group, which is kind of where you live in the UK funds some of the supplies.
Okay.
So at the time, I think they were funding the Libra, the Libra that you could scan, right, for a lot of kids. And had we pushed to get the Libra, we probably could have gotten that fairly soon. But we left the hospital at MDI, right? And then when we saw our first consultant, I think we asked about the Libra, and they were like, oh, well, we'll ask about funding, blah, blah, blah. But we could self-fund Dexcom anyway. So, and we could maybe wait for funding of some sort, but they didn't seem very optimistic at the time about funding our clinical commissioning group funding Dexcom. So I just called Dexcom. The nice thing is here, Dexcom is just over the counter. So we paid initially for Dexcom. I want to say it was like £159 a month for all supplies. And at the time, that was cheaper than my friend in the US was paying with her insurance. So, we just wanted to get started on the Dexcom right away. So I think she maybe had the G5 for a little while, and then the G6 came out, I think, not too long after she had started on the Dexcom. And then we did MDI for, I think, less than a year. And our first consultant, you'll love this. I said, we're really interested in the Omnipod. And she said, okay, yeah, we can order that for you. We can do that for you. And I was like, great, amazing. Let's get that Omnipod started, right? And so months go by between. So here you see the consultant every 3 months, right? And I went to the next appointment. I said, how's it going with the Omnipod? I haven't heard anything. Oh, yeah. We're working on that, right? So then, and I'm emailing the nurse too, just saying, how's the consultants promised us the Omnipod. So what are we doing with that? And then I think 6 months later, I asked about the Omnipod, or the consultant said, I think when we came to into the room, she said, oh, did you get your port? And I said, okay, wait, what port are you talking about? Are you talking about the port that you actually put the needle in and inject? She's like, yeah, we ordered that for you. And I said, oh, no. I've been asking for the Omnipod, a pump, for over 6 months. So are you telling me that is not what you ordered? And she's like, oh, and to her credit, like she could have been really defensive and denied what she didn't know, but she was actually she was great about it. She's just said, I'm really sorry. I didn't know. She didn't know at the time what Omnipod was.
What did she order you, an iPort?
Yeah.
And that took 6 months?
Yeah. Well, I don't even know if it would have. We never got the iPort, but anyway. So she just said, "Look, I'm going to transfer you to another hospital that actually has, that will do the Omnipod for you." And so then we transferred to a different hospital, and then we got on Omnipod shortly after that.
It's worth going over that you were standing in front of a healthcare professional telling them that you wanted a tubeless insulin pump called an Omnipod. And what they gave you was this thing that sticks on you. It injects once, and then you can put a needle inside of it to give yourself insulin so you don't have to get poked over and over again.
I know. It's pretty bad, but I think NHS has been underfunded for years and years and years. So you've got healthcare professionals that are, they maybe don't have the time and resources to learn more about supplies like this. I don't know.
Very, very nice. This is like me calling up saying I'm buying a car, and I show up and you give me a tricycle. And I go, it's still transportation, but not nearly what you heard me say. It's simply
I know
weird.
You get used to a different system here, though. I have been here 8 years, and I think now, waiting for things like right now, Rosie's we're waiting for her to come up to get Omnipod 5. So we're still using the Arrows.
Oh, you're on the Arrows.
No,
still.
We're using, only because I feel like if we switch to Dash and Loop, because we're looping with Arrows, right? If we switch to Dash, I'm just a bit worried that we'll get stuck on that and not be able to move to Omnipod 5 for another 4 years.
Is that a consideration of being in the UK?
I just don't know about switching like that. I just don't know. But we're on the list for Omnipod 5, and yes, it's a wait. Yes, it's yeah, you don't really get things right away like you can sometimes get in the US, but I'm okay with that. I mean, we don't pay anything now. So all of her supplies are 100%.
I can't wait for them to call you one day and tell you that it's all ready and you show up and they get you a Roomba. And
for sure.
You're like, wait, this is a robot vacuum cleaner. And I wanted the Omnipod 5. Right? No.
Yeah,
oh,
that's right.
Why don't I transfer you to a hospital who knows what that is? So.
Yeah. No, it's much better. I assure you. It's now her consultant now is fantastic. Excellent. And I mean, every time we go to our appointments, they're just like, you guys are doing great. What do you want? Right. And so we've said, we're ready for Omnipod 5.
Well, living in this system and having the ups and downs you've had with it, how did you figure out how to help Rosie? Like, where did all that information come from? From your friend who has type 1? Kid has type 1?
No. I think my friend and her son had such a different experience. Facebook wasn't even a thing when when her kid was younger. I mean, I listened to the podcast fairly early, Facebook groups. I went to a sugar surfing workshop fairly early on. I went to what used to be Friends for Life here, which is now called, I think it's called Children with Diabetes. It's like Friends for Life, but it's the UK version. And the thing is, like those Friends for Life events, evidence-based lectures for the parents. And so it was a kind of a combination of different things, but I knew that I wasn't going to get a lot of information from, the consultant that didn't know about Omnipod. And in fact, I remember going to one of the appointments fairly early on after we got the Dexcom and showing the nurse and the consultant her Dexcom graph. And they were like, oh, she's doing great. And I said, yeah, but she's eating and then she's spiking to 14. And sure, she's coming back down, but she's spiking to 14. And I remember the nurse saying, oh yeah, but we all spike after we eat. And I was like, but I don't think,
not I just 14.
Don't think I don't think we spiked to 14. Obviously that wasn't right.
Do you think they thought that happens to everybody? Like people with and without diabetes?
My guess is they'd probably be a bit more informed now. I think maybe access to information is maybe better than it was.
You're so polite about this part, Emily. Ago. Are you afraid you're going to get deported or something? What's going on? You're so like anytime you're like, oh no, it's okay. They're better at it now. Or I don't think they meant it. Or like,
I think I have a lot of compassion for NHS employees that, I just think that a lot of folks are doing the best they can with what they have. Again, it has been underfunded for years and years and years. And, even at that, I'm staying because I feel like my kid will never, ever pay for supplies. Right. Mm-hmm. But it's not without problems. And that being one of them, you get folks that I think the other problem is at that time, I don't think that pump reps that, or pump companies, I don't think they did a fantastic job of getting into the UK market here. I think, we go to the consultant and she'd say like, well, here we have this Medtronic. and that was kind of like the only option. There may have been one other one, but you could tell, they probably had done some kind of session with a Medtronic rep. And I'm not dissing on Medtronic or anyone else, but I just think they had a kind of a command of the market or knew how to get in with consultants here that maybe at the time Omnipod wasn't in yet. Maybe they definitely weren't in at that clinic.
Yeah. So, we never really said, you said you had kids early, you went back, got an advanced degree. What did you do professionally after that?
Oh, so I was a physical therapist in the US.
Okay. So you have, you have like that knowledge of that side of it, like being on the provider side.
For sure.
Yeah. It's not easy either. I've been doing that Cold Wind series with providers and, they're anonymous and they talk about their jobs and everything. And by the time I get done, every one of those conversations, I think there's problems on every side of this issue. And I don't
totally.
Yeah. And I don't see a way to fix any of them. It's, always, at the core human issues, obviously. And I don't think there's any way around it. I think we should all just be happy that things run as well as they do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting. But anyway, it's you're on their side. Like as you're going. I don't know if you know that about how you, there's nothing wrong
Yes
with
and
it.
no. I
Yeah.
was really mad. I mean, I was really upset. It took me a long time to get over the GP. I mean, I just thought he was an idiot. It took me a really long time to get over my hospital experience. And I think part of it was that I presented to this hospital expecting to be treated like a peer and expected to be listened to. And I was to an extent, but I just felt like, we stayed in the hospital. So we stayed in a ward for like 5 days, which is a bit ridiculous considering, we had some experience with a kid with type 1. I think had someone just in the beginning come to me and said, you guys are going to be great. This is, you're going to be fine. We're going to get you trained and we're going to send you home. I think I would have been fine. But because I thought that social services was looking for me, and here's my kid who, she's always home educated or unschooled, right? And she had this, idyllic childhood in London. But yeah, we didn't do the normal route. I didn't send her to kindergarten, or here it's called reception in year 1. But, we were living kind of, atypical lives compared to most other people. Because here, definitely at the time, I mean, home education was very rare. It was really stressful. It took me a long, long time to get over this idea that social services is looking for me and they're going to, make me send my kid to school or, investigate me unnecessarily. And I felt really protective of her education. I felt like, what a horrible time to assess someone's knowledge or your home ed provision when they're getting a type 1 diagnosis, when they probably haven't felt well in months, right? I mean, she would wake up in the morning and for months she was a bit irritable, right? And she was irritable with her best friend. And so she'd get up in the morning and she'd eat breakfast and then she'd just kind of like sit with her head resting on her hand, like she was going to fall asleep. And she was having a really hard time learning how to read. And by that time, she was 8 years old. Yeah. And I thought, does she have dyslexia? It just, or, maybe I thought she had, some kind of learning disability, but it didn't present until then. Right.
And then that possibility comes in that they're going to uproot the rest of her life now that you've got a diagnosis.
Yeah. It was really stressful. And, actually, I don't think she's dyslexic. I think she just had diabetes this whole time. And, poor thing, her sugar has been sitting at, 20 something for probably a long time.
Yeah, she's lucky she was upright and moving, let alone thinking and trying to read and learn something. Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to kind of finish up with, I know people sign up to do this like so far in advance that you probably don't remember what you wrote. But, when it said, what are some of the themes you'd like to cover? You said parenting, modeling the care with joy, transitions to teens, giving kids full autonomy in most aspects of their lives. Now, I think your conversations talked about the autonomy part a lot, actually. But what did you mean about the rest of it? Like, what about modeling care with joy? What did you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, well, Rosie's 14 now, which I think sometimes this, independence with diabetes or moving towards independence happens so fast. And probably when I wrote that, I was doing a lot more for her. But now she's going to school now. She chose to go to school this year, and I totally support that, whatever she wants to do. And she's doing a lot more of the day-to-day care and she's doing great. And I think, where I was going with that was one thing I really have appreciated about the podcast is I feel like the way that you have cared for Arden is probably fairly similar to how I've cared for Rosie. And I think had you been a different parent or advocated a different way of parenting or and parenting with diabetes, I wouldn't have been a listener, right? But I think, managing your child's diabetes with a smile on your face and just doing it, even when it's like the smallest task of, poking their finger or, bolusing, right? When the phone could be right next to them. And even if you say, oh, hey, could you please bolus for this meal? And they're, they don't want to, or they're busy, or they're playing a video game or whatever, they're doing homework. And so you just do it for them. And again, you do it with a smile on your face. I think it's a great way to manage. I think probably outcomes are better that way.
Yeah.
My guess is you get more independent, capable individuals, adults with type 1 that way.
Right. Oh, okay. That's really interesting. I think the same thing. I think you're going to do these things anyway. If you moan and groan through it, it's just going to permeate everything,
Yeah.
Emily, I enjoyed this with you. I appreciate it. It's a different perspective on something. I like that you and I agree. Like, it's interesting because as you were talking about, like, letting kids learn at home and on their own pace, I was like, this all makes a lot of sense to me. Like when you said the kid came back ahead, not behind, I thought that makes sense to me too. Like all of this makes sense to me. And then the panic I have from growing up broke, like sets right in. Like, well, what if you can't pay for yourself? Like, what if you can't get insurance? Like, what if Arden couldn't get health insurance? Like that kind of stuff. Like, freaks me out
for sure. I think that's definitely a real concern in the US for sure.
Yeah. Not so much there.
I'm definitely not anti-degree. It's more just,
no,
I think,
you don't come across as anti anything, actually. You come across as kind of like thoughtful, wide open, willing to experience things. You're not like, you're not worried about 50 years from now, but you're not letting it make your decisions for the moment. I thought it was all really interesting. Just interesting even further how different people's perspectives can make them pick that information up and what they think about next. Like once they hear it, like, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Absolutely.
This is it's wonderful. If we haven't missed anything, I'm going to say thank you, but I'll ask you here, is there anything we didn't talk about that we should have?
I can't think of anything.
Nice. See how easy this was? Where you weren't worried, right? You were fine. It
was much easier. Yeah, I just didn't want to do the gas station voice or cry. Those were my goals.
You almost made me cry with that going to California thing. And I didn't hear a gas station voice.
I feel like I was pretty good about that.
Yeah, I think of that as a local news anchor voice too. I love it. Did they do that in England? Did you do that fake excitement about everything on the news?
I guess so.
Do they?
Yeah. I don't watch a lot of
I don't either. But when
that kind of news.
Yeah. The local news just cracks me up. I love it. He's like, hey, Bobby, I have a great story today about a cat that died. I'm like, why are you sound so excited? The poor cat's dead.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think I've seen that here. I guess I haven't really seen like local.
I love it when they try to transition from one thing to another in that same voice. They go from like this upbeat, stupid thing to something horrific, but they never leave that big, dumb voice they have. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
There's
that's bad. Yeah.
Everyone should find. All right. I'm going to tell everybody how to find this. There's a Casey. All right. Casey Kasem is not a person probably anyone knows anymore. But he was a radio disc jockey, really like very popular. He was on all over the country. So if you Google Casey Kasem dog death dedication, go ahead and YouTube Casey Kasem dog death dedication, and you will find audio of this guy trying to lay down ads, and they come out of like a birthday celebration into a dedication for a dead dog, and he just flips out in the middle of it. He's just like, how do you expect me to come out of a goddamn upbeat thing into this fucking dog dedicated? He's just like going crazy. And anyway, that's just find that. That'll be a nice 5 minutes for you. I don't know if that's like something I can like include here or if it's copyrighted, but holy take a second, because you want to hear a person just like in 5 seconds have an existential like decision to make. Like, am I really gonna do big happy voice out of a birthday dedication into a dead dog? Like, and he just loses his shit. It's fantastic.
And no one can really blame him for losing it. That's pretty great.
As he's doing it, I'm like, he's 100% right. I mean, he sounds like a diva because he's, recording ads for like a I don't know, a radio station. His life is probably fantastic. But, you know, he's like, he just is like, how do you expect? Oh, it's fantastic. Go find it if you haven't heard it.
Okay.
Emily, thank you very much. Can you hold on 1 second for me?
Sure.
Thanks. A huge thank you to Eversense CGM for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Are you tired of having to change your sensor every 7 to 14 days? With the Eversense CGM, you just replace it once every 6 months via a simple in-office visit. Learn more and get started today at eversensecgm.com/juicebox. US Med sponsored this episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Check them out at usmed.com/juicebox or by calling 888-721-1514. Get your free benefits check and get started today with US Med. A huge thank you to one of today's sponsors, Gvoke Glucagon. Find out more about Gvoke HypoPen at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. You spell that GVOKEGLUCAGON.com/juicebox. If you're newly diagnosed, check out the Bold Beginnings series. Find it at juiceboxpodcast.com up in the menu, in the featured tab of the private Facebook group, or go into the audio app you're listening in right now and search for Juicebox Podcast Bold Beginnings. Juicebox is one word, Juicebox Podcast Bold Beginnings. This series is perfect for newly diagnosed people. Hey, thanks for listening all the way to the end. I really appreciate your loyalty and listenership. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.